Come on now.
Finally found the fucking thing.
There we go.
Oh,
Good
sorry.
morning, YouTube. Get this thing tweeted out here. And we'll be ready to ball out this. Hello there, and welcome to the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast here on HawkFanatic.com. Thursday, May the 1st. Happy May Day, 9:18 a.m. Central Time. I am Rob Howe, joined by Scott Docterman from The Athletic. I think we can kind of exhale now, Scott. I think the transfer portal's kind of slowing down. Spring football's over. Recruiting will be big in May and June, but it just seems like at least the team stuff, while it never stops anymore, should at least slow down a little bit.
Yeah, I think now that the portal has closed as far as entries go,
Right.
except for those that are graduates, that's ongoing. But I think as long as that's closed, it's going to be a little bit slower now, and we're not going to have to worry about, who's going to be in, who's going to leave, come back, whatever. So I think overall, that part of things have slowed down. I think now that they've gotten a couple of guys out of the portal, even in recent, corner and a safety and on the Iowa end of things for football, I think that's I don't know if it's going to be completely done, but they may go with one more or something if somebody falls in their lap or they're seeking somebody else. But overall, I think the portal end of things for that side is over. I know women and men are looking, they've got, what is it, 11 guys now on their roster. I believe that's the number, 10 or 11. And
Yeah, if you include Jacob Cook, the walk-on
okay,
from Iowa City West, they are
okay,
at 11. If you add in Tate Sage, who we'll talk about, the Oklahoma
yeah.
high school kid who flipped from Drake to Iowa yesterday.
Yeah. So, and then the women, I think they're kind of, I would guess casually looking. Is that probably fair to say that they are
Yeah,
looking and they are, just, but that they're being a little choosy in this one. So I think overall they're all sitting in pretty good shape.
yeah, it's been a eventful and entertaining view of watching all the teams do what they do in the portal, and that becomes more the norm now, year to year. It's still an adjustment for folks, but I think as we go along here, it's going to become more of the norm, and you'll realize that you're going to have a quarterback for 1 year or a point guard for 1 year. It's different for fans. They're not um, getting to know a kid over 4 or 5 years a lot of times now. It's a quick, hey, how you doing? Thanks for coming, and we appreciate your efforts and good luck.
Yeah, that's the sad part of it now is it reminds me, when I was at SEC in Burlington, and they had a dominant junior college program for a long time, and it was kind of this, hey, how you doing? You got to watch them play, and then you were kind of excited to see them where they would end up, and I think men's basketball is turning into that a little bit, that transient type of system, and that's not healthy. I wouldn't think really for the sport as a whole, but also it's not the worst thing either. I mean, I'm happy for the players. They deserve to be paid. They make money for the athletics department, football especially, but there's more players with football and then basketball also as well. And you see the $1 billion that the NCAA gets from the tournament, and it deserves to be some revenue sharing out of that, but it does add to the changing climate of teams moving up, and I think we're seeing it in a couple of different veins. And one is NCAA tournament. There weren't, people thought it was boring because there weren't any real, first round upsets. And I think part of that is when you look at Final Four teams, Janai Broome, he was at what, Morehead State, and Walter Clayton was at Iona. Those are teams that if they're in the tournament with those players, they upset teams. And you didn't have that. And then you look at the NFL draft, and this is just another number. 5 years ago, the group of five had 48 draft picks. Now they had 18, and the Big
Wow.
Ten,
Yeah.
Big Ten and SEC had 60% of the draft picks. They had combined for 150 out of the 255. That's transfer portal there. That's players moving up to different levels. And wanting to play at the highest level. If you're good, you're going to go, hey, I want to play better, and you want to make money doing it. It's just the way that, it works in this system. So, and that said, I think Iowa in both, particularly men's basketball and football, I think have done a really good job in the portal. I think they've been very productive. McCollum, I think, has gotten a lot of good pieces. And then I think Iowa football has supplemented the pieces, the areas it needs, and has done a nice job there. We'll all see on the field how that measures up. But overall, I couldn't be, I would be more optimistic with what all this is, how this has transpired rather than pessimistic.
Yeah, it's also a process for these programs, right? To find their spot.
Yeah.
Sweet pot, sweet spot, same thing. For Iowa, in all sports, smaller population in the state, developmental programs. I know people hate to hear that term sometimes, but most programs are developmental. Even Ohio State, but Ohio State can afford to make more mistakes and just continue to pay, especially with the NIL. And schools like that, Alabama, SEC schools, whatever. But Iowa's kind of not poor. Iowa's still in a really good place, but resources aren't as much as some of those other schools. So and we talked about it, I think, with quarterback last week, and Chuck Long probably feeling good about his records now with the landscape. How do you develop a Jimmy Sullivan behind, a Hank Brown and Mark Gronowski? How does that work? So it's going to be constant roster management for these programs, but it feels like Iowa's getting itself in a comfortable place. I'm really impressed with how McCollum's done it so far, because I was most worried about his resources and his ability to get a roster together this late. So I agree with you. I think what he's done is really impressive. And I think Iowa football has figured out kind of where it needs to be, where its sweet spot is in terms of using the portal and doing it like chronologically, right? You go through December and you evaluate all your guys. Maybe it looks a little bit different in March and April when you're evaluating them again. And then, okay, we need a safety, we need a cornerback, we need a defensive tackle, whatever the case may be. And then you address those needs as time goes along, instead of just throwing a bunch of shitload of money at everybody and just saying, hey, let's everybody go. And we can't do that as much now either with the roster limits.
Yeah, right. And 105 is going to be crippling for teams in different ways. I think, you look at, Kirk talked about it on Saturday. I asked him about it. And I think what's really important for developmental programs, particularly in this part of the world, Iowa State, Minnesota, Nebraska, Wisconsin, Iowa and Wisconsin have been as good as anybody at developing walk-ons into starters, scholarship players, NFL guys over the last, 25 years, if not more. And, the ability, and a lot of that is, having a pool of like 125 to 130 players. Now you're going to have to be really selective in who you get. So the types of players that you're going to miss on now are guys like Kyler Schott, who's 5'11", maybe 6 foot if he's got cleats on. Local, hey, we'll give you a shot. Come on in, play hard. And then all of a sudden you're like, wow, you know what? He's not so bad. Let's stick him in there. And then before you know it, he's a productive player, not an NFL guy, but a productive player. And I think you're going to miss that because there's going to be a lot of guys that you just say, you know what? We're just going to give you an invitation here. Come on in, see what you got. And now you're not going to have that. And that's going to be really unfortunate. But I think the smart thing that let's start with Iowa football on this is, back in December or before that, but particularly December, they identified premium needs immediately. And that was quarterback and defensive tackle, and to an extent, wide receiver. They went out and got a guy, but brought in Mark Gronowski, brought in Hank Brown, brought in Jonah Pace, brought in Bryce Hawthorne, guys that they felt like they needed to have at those two positions. Then as whether it's spring went on, and they also looked at tackle, but the prices were just exorbitant, for what was out there. I mean, there was a tackle, a FCS tackle who was, shopping himself in, and I was told he was kind of like, what their comparison was, because they brought him in, they looked at him, was a poor man's Nick Dion. So they thought, you know what, plug and play, serviceable, nice player, uh,
Versatile.
can play multiple spots, all that. 800K,
Yeah.
and he got it. And they're like, we're not paying that for that, because then they'll look at their roster and say we can develop better than that. At least this guy, we know what we've got, and we can think we can develop. Well, as the spring went on, they realized that, you know what, we're a little deficient in the secondary, and we're a little deficient up front. So they went and got Bryce George, to play, and I would anticipate him. That probably cost a lot of money, and but yet, they beat out USC for him, and they're able to get him. And then you look at the secondary that they not only this year but beyond, because I think to the two players that they've gotten fit different needs. One, Shaheed Barros is an immediate guy. That's a guy who you think he can compete to start right away. And then Ty Hudkins, I think, is a guy. He's a sophomore. He played a lot of special teams last year for Purdue. Maybe he's not a starter, but he's a guy who can provide him instant depth, work his way up, and then maybe he can end up starting at some point if you have injuries or somebody really doesn't perform well. So I think they handle this well. And then you lose Brendan Sullivan, and so you bring in Jeremy Heklinski to also compete, because I think the eyes on the quarterback situation is you've got a starter, Mark Gronowski, who is going to start. He's the number one. Now you're bringing in a bunch of guys to compete for next year. And, you've got Hank Brown in there for basically a year and a half to compete. And then you've got, Jeremy Heklinski who can come in and compete this year, and Jimmy Sullivan, and then, Cash Herrera when he gets here, and then whoever next quarterback in, whoever.
I guess Stratton's staying, right?
He's staying at this point, yeah, unless he
So
graduates.
that's not bad. I mean, that's keeping him in the fold is pretty important. You got a guy. You cannot pay for experience at this level.
And you look. Okay, take Jackson Stratton. He's right now he's vaulted himself from being a nobody, but he got pressed into service last year. He was the winner as the starter. Did he do much? I did a little bit, but when he got in there, but now I thought he performed really well. You took a lot of video, and he was impressive the other day. Impressive against a second team defense. He looks like, to me, he's capable of being a scholarship quarterback, whether that's at Iowa or somewhere else. That's improvement. And so next year you might say maybe he's not your guy, but he's safe. And there's no price small enough to pay for safe at backup quarterback.
Yeah, no doubt. And each position will be different, but quarterback is that position where it's definitely semester to semester. And you're just like, okay, where do I stand? All right. And that's where, from the student athlete standpoint, and then the coaches are, okay, how is this, X player, how is he developing? Is he, how does the depth chart look from month to month to 6 months to a year or whatever? And that's going to be constantly moving, and that's kind of what they're faced with now. But if you can do it right, and then you're going to have just guys that just up and enter the trend. John Nestor was the name I was thinking of. Guys that just boom, you're leaving. You're like, all right, well, we need a replacement. So boom, you go. So you're constantly moving parts, and you're getting Hank Brown's a younger guy, Mark Gronowski's an older guy, so you addressed kind of two levels there. Shaheed Barros, as you said, is a 1-year guy. And then the kid they got from Purdue, what the heck was his name? Ty Hudkins.
Yeah.
He's like you said, he played as a true freshman, all 12 games, mostly on special teams. He's a guy you hope to develop in your program. So the transfer portal can serve a lot of needs for you. And again, it seems like Iowa is finding a sweet spot there, football wise and basketball as well.
Yeah, right. You look at quarterback. This is the reality. And now Iowa has had a major problem. We've talked about it and documented it before about attrition at that position, where it's everybody's got. I mean, every single quarterback on this roster came in June or later last year. 5 of them weren't even on the roster in the fall. That's how insane this is. One, Jackson Stratton was the walk-on that was there in the fall.
Yeah.
So you're just turning this and churning this, and you could tell that there is a concerted effort, here by Tim Lester, especially. Gronowski is a different situation, but with the others, it's find somebody and develop them. You're not going to keep, I would say anybody from Hank Brown on down to, the recruits next year. If you keep one full term, you're lucky. It's just the way it is. And and I think people need to accept that. And I think what you do is you say, if we can find one that gives us 2 to 3 years, that's worth its weight in gold.
Yeah.
It just is. If that's Heklinski, great. If that's Hank Brown, fantastic. If it's Jimmy Sullivan, wonderful. If it's somebody, under the radar like Ryan Fitzgerald or maybe a recruit next year, well, you'll deal with that when you deal with it. I just, so, the one thing you don't want to do, and this is in this day and age of the portal and how much money you're going to spend, whether it's from the athletic department or outside of it, is you just don't want to rely on buying quarterbacks over and over and over again. Like, you take Hank Brown. If he's the number 2 this year, performs well, you give him a little boost, you think he's their starter, and then next year he explodes as a junior, you're only paying him once, and you've had him in your system then ultimately for 3 years, and you got that kind of production. That's exactly what you want now. And the same thing goes for any of the other quarterbacks. What you don't want is what you did with Cade, what you're doing with Mark Gronowski, and you hope Mark Gronowski succeeds. I think he'll be really good if he's healthy, but you just don't want to go out and have to pay a heavy amount, which they did, to go out and get somebody like that.
Good luck to the Tulane opponents this year with Sully to Jacuzzi. That's going to be a powerful combination down there in New Orleans.
It's going to be one hell of a whirlpool. Johnny Jacuzzi catching passes from Brendan Sullivan. I'm excited for them. Actually, I think I'm. What was really cool to hear, Rob, on Saturday from Kirk, he was really praised Brendan Sullivan, and I know that people loved him inside. It's just, again, only two guys, only one guy could play quarterback. Now, if Gronowski gets hurt, he'll probably feel bad about it because he'd probably rather stay. And then, of course, Iowa would be like, oh God, But he was one of the captains on their championship teams. He was a leader for sure. So I think that's really. But that's the situation you're in now. That's players want to play.
Yeah, it was handled well, I thought. I mean, obviously Iowa sent Sullivan a message when they brought Gronowski in. They're like, all right, we're not sure you're the guy, so we're bringing another guy in. And then Sullivan went through spring ball, most of it, and was a good teammate and was like, well, you made a decision. Now I have to make a decision. So it's appropriate for Kirk because it was handled professionally by everybody. And that's because it's more of a business now that we've talked about it, NIL, transfer portal, all that stuff. It's everybody, people on both sides need to be understanding of it, the business, and everybody having an interest, in what the outcome is for a particular player and a team. So yeah, it's just kind of keep your rosters handy. That's a good idea because you're gonna have guys come in and out of here quickly, and other guys that you get to know more, but they're still all Hawkeyes, right? You're gonna have more alumni now than you used to have.
For sure, and there are a couple of guys that performed on Saturday now who are in the portal that one requested to practice to the end, and that was Khalil Tate. And the other, James Rezar, and that's, I think, more of a making sure he gets proper medical care at UIHC and from his ACL in the fall. And I don't know what that means going forward I'm sure Khalil Tate will find another home, probably a Valley school or a MAC school or something like that. And I think with, and then, with James Rezar, that's hard to say. He's got an electrifying speed. Does he go back south and try to be a quarterback again? Does he just, stick around and they say, well, we'll just, see if you can compete here at wide receiver? I don't know. But either way, but those as you said, it is a business now, and it's going to be covered like a business now. And it's going to, which is unfortunate a little bit because we still you get to know these guys at 16 when you're making your calls for Hawk Fanatic now. And we get to know them, whether they're at, locally or, when they sign and they're still young people. And then now, hey, you're young people with a 6-figure salary minimum, and some people, quarterback, you're getting 7+. That's something to really, you're going to gravitate to that. I mean, you're making more than a lot of assistant coaches. And that's the same thing in basketball too. So I think that's something to really watch out for.
Yeah, and I think part of, and this will segue us into just talking about what we saw Saturday, is it seems like each year we see fewer guys at this open spring practice because of injuries. Because if it's just something, they measure, it's a business, right? You're not going to push somebody out there for, I want to say a meaningless practice, but the chance of, aggravating an injury, increasing the intensity of an injury. It's just like the offensive line, for instance, Logan Jones and Bo Stevens out. You talked about the Ferris State tackle not being there. So we basically got 2/3 of the offensive line we saw.
Yeah, because Jennings Dunker wasn't out
No,
there.
he wasn't there either. So who played? Was it Cade Peeper?
Cade Peeper. Yeah, I mean, I wrote down the names
of the projected starters. So I mean, what do you really take from that? The starting quarterback's not playing, but you take what you can, right?
Yeah.
And positive signs. The offense looked like it had a chance. The receivers, I thought, played well, particularly Vandersea and Howard. I think and that's really and Parker and particularly Vandersea and Howard. Scott, we've talked about the dynamic of the position and having slots in Gill and Phillips. Those are more slot guys.
Yeah.
The question was on the outside, and to see Vandersea and Howard be that involved Saturday and accomplish some things, that's a good sign, no matter if you're playing against air.
No question. Yeah. Yeah. I thought that they were we've heard from people and then got to see it a little bit. And again, I always walk in with the asterisks saying 1 practice of 15,
right.
All those players aren't there. And so this is our one opportunity to see them. So yes, they could have had a great practice the day before and it sucked today, or vice versa, because that's by all accounts, Jackson Stratton had his best practice by far. Good for him. He did it in front of people. That's the way you want to do it. But I thought wide receiver was what stood out to me. And maybe it's because all these years it did not stand out to me. That you're, even when they had NFL guys like Amir Smith-Marset and Brandon Smith, and that they would be shut down in a lot of cases. And some of that was quarterback, some of that. I was very impressed with wide receiver. It was really one that I went, okay, happy you learned to putt, and I think we start with Brees Vandersea. To me, I think he is, he last year just basically got off the school bus and started playing and caught 2 touchdowns in the opener. And it was like, whoa, where's this guy? And then the true freshman caught up to him and he got hurt and he was out for a while, but certainly looks the part as an X receiver, just tall, big, physical now, separates, has great athletic ability. He's the type of guy you look at and you go, sure, he should be at Iowa.
He's the closest thing to Brandon Smith that they've had since Brandon Smith.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, and Lord knows I'm not going to expect him to be a high point, big time catch guy like Brandon was, but he might be more consistent, and that could be better too. As you said, Dayton Howard also looks the part. Tall, athletic, has gotten much better. You can tell that everything's coming together for him.
Stronger. He was really skinny when he got here.
Right. And and you kind of wonder with Jarrett Bowie, he's been injured, and that's been unfortunate for him. He was a starter in the bowl game. So so you feel really good about the X position, if that's kind of where they keep him, which I'd imagine that they play there. It's just now, and then you flip over to some of the other spots. We didn't see Jacob Gill the other day, but you know what he's about. Sam Phillips, I would have really liked to have seen him play, compete, but he wasn't out there. Seth Anderson, though, is moving forward. And I think he is a guy that you want to see him healthy, because if you see him healthy with a decent quarterback, I think he can be a really good player. And beyond that, KJ Parker showed some stuff. I think he is. I don't know if this is his year, just because of all the guys that are in front of him. I mean, you throw in Caden Weegan and Gill and Anderson, Phillips. I mean, those four seniors right there.
Yeah.
So he might be more of a deep backup guy that gets some reps here and there, but be patient, it's coming. But I think he's going to be a quality performer for Iowa in the future.
Yeah. And it's good to have optimism about a position that there really hasn't been much involved since Amir and Brandon left.
Yeah.
It's been kind of a wasteland. And like Scott said, part of that has been quarterback play, part of it was play calling, design, attrition, things like that. So
Yeah.
hopefully, again, developmental program. You have to have guys like Bowie and Howard and Vanderzee and hopefully KJ Park, guys down the road that stay in and just kind of build up to the point where they can contribute when they're second, third, fourth year players. And then you have a group and you have a wide receiving core, not a couple guys here. Let's throw a walk on in. There's some stability there. So,
right.
if Gronowski can have a season that shows prospective recruits, transfer portal targets that, hey, this offense is taking it forward. The Brian Ferentz national embarrassment stuff goes farther into the rearview mirror, and then you build on it from there. And we've talked about that, Scott. They had to kind of rebuild this thing piece by piece. It's by no means there yet, and there's certainly this is cautious optimism going into 2025, but at least you see progress.
Yeah, I absolutely, because you want, first of all, everybody looks for that optimism, so you find ways to kind of talk about it and have interest in it. And I think this is legitimate. Are they going to be Ohio State? No. I mean, there's no Jeremiah Smith here. There's no Emeka Buka or Carnell Tate who's coming back. There's just not that type of receiver. That said, you don't need that type of receiver to be successful in the passing game. They are NFL first rounders. There aren't any here. But what there are potential productive receivers. And Iowa clearly fumbled this position as badly as you could ever fumble any position in this program's history with how it handled receivers. When you look at even after, Tyrone Tracy, you made him an X. He's an NFL running back running for 1,000 yards. What did he want to do? He wanted to play the slot. And he shows that he's got that kind of quickness, toughness, and explosiveness. And you didn't do it. That's on coaching. That's not on Tyrone Tracy. Charlie Jones, what are you doing? He caught 100+ balls. He led the country in receiving and catches. Why didn't you get him the ball? Find ways to get him the ball. They didn't do that. Malpractice. You look at Keegan Johnson, who I thought had a lot of talent and, was very explosive his first year. Now, whatever happened. But he wasn't available. And Brody Brecht, when you kind of knew what you're going to get, you kind of thought he might be on the Reese Vanderzee side of things, but he also knew that he's going to be doing what he's doing now, which is making money throwing a baseball. But Rob, going back to the beginning of 2022 season, when they had one available scholarship receiver against South Dakota State and Iowa State, and I think Brody played maybe a snap or two. That was just an abomination. That's a position you can never get yourself into. And to see it be so vastly different today than what it was, and it's not just numbers available, it's quality players getting better.
Development.
Dare I say, I look back and I hate to say this, but because it was a different era, but if Brandon Smith and Amir Smith-Marset were here in this era, I don't know that they'd be here. Because when you look at Brandon, he could have done so much better at a different school. It's like, why not throw him a jump ball every 2 to 3 quarters? He's capable of it. But that said, that didn't happen. And I think when you look at these guys, you see a very competitive unit. You're going to lose guys. You're just going to lose a couple of guys, my guess is in December. Somebody's going to want to hit the portal because they're not getting enough reps. I mean, if you look at the three sophomores, Vanderzee, Howard, and Bowie, they're all talented enough to play. Can one of them move over to Z? Maybe Bowie could, maybe Howard could, but you really want to make sure that you got, but you want to make them happy and keep them, because I think they are building a foundation at this position that's just been a wasteland for a long, long time.
And then you look at a guy just looking a little bit down the road for the summer when Terrence Smith comes in. That's another guy that, okay, where does he fit in here? He's a little more raw than some guys because he plays basketball and plays it really well. Yeah. But how can he develop? I mean, Vanderzee came in but Vanderzee had a clearer path because there weren't as many people in his way to get playing time. Right. As we just talked about, Smith's got to hop over some guys, but you don't need him to now. You don't need to put him in that position. If he earns it, fine, but you have the luxury of bringing him along however you want to.
That's the house money part of this. And
yeah.
You always want, you have it most positions. You have it defensive line, you have it at offensive line, tight end, everything. Rarely do you get in a position where you need to throw somebody in to throw somebody in. And wide receiver had, unfortunately, for Iowa, been that position all the way up until right this very minute. And Terrence Smith, if he comes in and balls out and he's number one, then throw him out there. Yeah, absolutely. As much as good things that we've seen, if this guy's the best player, play him.
Exactly.
No question. But if he isn't, or if it's close, then slow play him. You do have 4 wide receivers who are seniors. They may be more effective. You do have Vanderzee and Howard. You do want to kind of, if all things are equal, you want to reward, they're still young too. You want to reward them for their work ethic and what they put into the program, and place Smith, probably on scout team, because you're going to be playing some good opponents. You're going to need a good receiver to give your defense a good look. So, that being said, they're going to have to play 1 versus 1 or 2 versus 1 a lot more in practice than they really would want to, because of the 105. But still, you're still going to need players like that to give good looks. So they're in finally a position, kind of like offensive line last year, where they're finally in a position where, okay, now you've got numbers, you can be productive. Now you can kind of get things the way you want to. And I think that's, really healthy part of this program right now.
Again, in the context and with the perspective that a lot of guys were out Saturday, a couple guys that stood out to me, not surprising, Max Llewellyn. I think he's a guy I think could be all conference. He looks like, I don't know if I have a comp for him. Maybe Scott does, but he is a perfect example of what we've just talked about the last 10 minutes of developing a guy being able to develop in the program to the point where he is now ready to become an all-conference type player. I really like what I saw from Zach Lutmer too. I think his versatility at the safety cash type position is valuable. He's a heck of an athlete. So those are 2 guys that stood out to me. Then a couple of the young cornerbacks. I thought Godfrey played well. CJ Bell was impressive in a little bit of time he got in there. TJ Hall, I think you mentioned last week, is a guy the coaches think took a step forward. He looked good. So a lot of good things on defense as well.
Yeah, I mean, your first point about Max Llewellyn. I don't know if he's got the tats. Maybe it'll come one of these days. But that's kind of my comp for him. And I think, playing where he did, it's like, dude, what are you doing? You're crushing the right tackle, whoever the right tackle is at that point. I think it was Dotzler and stuff.
Yeah.
He was a game wrecker, and I think that was something that was pretty obvious. So yes, I think he's on the fast track to being a dominant player. I mean, he came up with one of the biggest plays of the season, at the end, the strip sack of Dylan Raiola that won the game, allowed Drew Stevens to kick a long field goal for the victory. And I think he's got everything you need from that position to be really successful. We didn't see Aaron Graves. I think he's got that same opportunity to take that step from being a good player And he had some really good moments to being a dominant player in the Big Ten. And we didn't see also Ethan Hurkett. He's been out, I think, most of
Mhm.
spring. And my question is, up front is going to be, how do you replace YA Black? Because YA could just is a space eater, could take on double teams, is very physical, which is why the Steelers grabbed him for their 3-4 defense. He's a perfect fit for it. I expect him, but Phil was surprisingly happy with Jonah Pace and Bryce Hawthorne. Brian Allen was out. Kenny Merriweather, I thought was decent
Yeah,
out
agreed.
there. And then, some other guys, the younger alignment, I thought caught my eye a little bit. Joseph Anderson shows that burst off the edge. And if he can provide that with his athletic ability, like, hey, 5 times, 8 times a game, you bring him out in that NASCAR package and he's off the edge and he's getting a burst. You can't hold that back. Don't expect him to be playing full service defensive end, but they didn't do that with Joe Evans. All he did was go get the guy right off the bat when he was an early player. And Chima Chineki, is that how you pronounce it?
Unique, I think.
Chineke, I'm sorry. Chineke, I thought he was a guy that flashed for me up front. I thought he was another guy that I really like. And then finally, I would say don't fail to include um, Yosei Epineza, because he's a 5-star, and like his brother, he's talented enough. You got to get him on the field. Maybe he is that guy that steps right in and takes up some.
Yeah, you can never have enough defensive linemen, man. You just can't. Um, just keeps guys fresh,
Yeah,
guys with different skill sets, guys that can help you in, like Scott was talking about, the NASCAR, the Raider package, all
yeah,
the different packages and different alignments you have. You need as many talented guys as you can get.
yeah. So if you could throw him in, he could even play less than AJ did, because AJ, they had, well, I mean, you think about this. You had Anthony Nelson on one side. He's just signed his third NFL contract with the
Great
same team.
story.
Fantastic. Parker, I think, might finally be done. He played with the Lions part of last year, but didn't make it out. And then Chauncey Golston was on a he was more the developmental guy but he was the backup alongside AJ early on, and then they both became starters and became outstanding players. And both of them are on their next deals too. I
Yep.
mean, Chauncey is really cashed in with the Giants this year. So, they've got this kind of mix, but I could see Yosei, if you get him in 10, 15, 20 snaps a game at edge, pass rushing situations, a little bit of run stopping. That again, when you're playing the teams you're going to play, Penn State, Oregon, Iowa State with a really good quarterback, you're going to need all the guys you can get up front, and I think they got it. So, to your point about the secondary, um, I think they're really set at safety. We didn't see Xavier. I think you're just waiting for that big year, and I
Mm-hmm.
think I think it can happen now. It's kind of like this, Rob. You know how some people grow? They grow as people. They grow as
Yeah.
employees, and it's kind of like if your oldest goes to college, then your second oldest or your youngest or whatever kind of showcases their personality because they're not quite boxed in. And that might be him there at it's free safety now instead of strong. And I think free is better. It's more of a boundary safety. You're not playing the field. That's the strong side.
Mm.
And that's more of people associate strong safety, especially in Iowa's defense, as like Bob Sanders, big hitter. It's not really that's not the case. You're playing the field. You're playing
Yeah.
the larger portion of the field. And I think having, whether it's Lutmer or Entringer there and the other one at Cash, those two have impressed me as much as anybody. I think you put those two in with Llewellyn, you've got 3 guys that I think will take that next step and be outstanding players. And so, both Lutmer and Entringer are faster. They're probably better in pass coverage right now. But free safety allows Xavier to be a little more of a hitter and make more tackles, kind of like when Schulte did, but a
Yeah.
little more athletic. And then I was really impressed with TJ Hall. Like,
Yeah.
they
Agreed.
completed a lot of passes on these guys, but TJ didn't allow a lot of separation. He was physical when he needed to be. He is a starter, no question.
Kamari.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
That's a
he's
good hit on Kamari. And then
yeah,
Kamari got him back later with a
right,
short pass that he turned upfield.
right, right. Two good players there, by the way.
Yeah.
Then,
Like the throwing to the running backs too, by the
yeah,
way. I want
yes, yeah. They needed to do that for, I don't know, 25 years, but yeah,
it.
I've always wondered that, especially because for the first X number of years of the Ferentz era, I was covering the Chiefs, and their screen game was the best in the NFL, and it wasn't close when you had Priest Holmes. And you had Willie Rofe, who's in the Hall of Fame. You had Will Shields, who's in the Hall of Fame. You had Brian Waters, who was a 6 or 7 time Pro Bowler. Casey Wigman could get out and pull. You had those guys, Tony Gonzalez out in front, and Jason Dunn was a really good tight end that way. And I'm like watching this, and I'm like, why can't you do that with a zone?
Yeah.
You got to move, run and move offensive line. Do this more often, and they just never did it well. And I think they can do that a little bit better here too with the running backs that they have, where I think are pretty good as well.
A couple other guys I'll mention real quick, and we'll get to a commercial here. See what Scott thinks on these guys. Carson Scherer, I thought looked good, and he again guy that's developed in the program, dealt with injuries. He looks like he's ready to be a key contributor this year. And then watch out for Derek Weiskopf
Yeah.
because he may force his way on the field.
This is the most interesting battle on the whole roster for me as linebacker,
Yep.
because you've got three holdovers, it's that are seniors that have played a lot of special teams, or in Carson's situation has been injured a lot.
Yeah.
They've always said he's as athletic as anybody, even going to the days of Jack Campbell, Carson might be our most athletic linebacker. Always injured, always injured. Now is his chance to kind of thrive, and maybe he does have that takeoff senior year. Jaden Harrell, big, physical, bumper. Jay Higgins, a little bit bigger than Jay Higgins. Can he be that kind of productive guy? Can he make the detailed small plays?
Needs to
Jay,
be more consistent.
yeah,
Higgins and Campbell and the guys that have been there the last few, well, through the years,
yeah,
Joel, you got to be consistent if you're playing that position. You can't have breakdowns.
yeah. And so, and Jay could do other little things. I mean, Jack was a freak, man. He was
Yeah.
an athletic marvel. That's why he's a first round draft pick and he's starting. Jay could also do small things like get 4 interceptions. He was
Yeah.
in the right place at the right time. He knew how to do things. I mean, coverage, you'd think that guy only runs a 4.8 and he's kind of a boxy looking guy, but he was really good in coverage too. He knew where to be. He didn't give up passes because in the zone he knew where to be. And Nick Jackson was very underrated as well. So can their skill set kind of be different? And then Jackson Rexroth played a ton of special teams. He's the Leo. He's been okay. But on the flip side, the 5 youngest linebackers they have are studs. I mean, athletic marvels. Weiskopf, high jump 6'8".
Yeah.
Then you look at Preston Reese. He's a quarterback in high school, and he squats 630.
I didn't know that. That's impressive.
He set the record, and he's a redshirt freshman. He set the inside linebacker or the overall linebacker record in the squat with 630. That's just unbelievable. And then you look at Cam Buffington. His RAS is off the charts, and Notre Dame was calling him late. I mean, it wanted him. And then you bring in the 2 guys, Carson Cooney and Bert Goucher from the Chicagoland, who are true freshmen, and they're 4-star guys. So, so that kind of meeting.
Don't sleep on Nolan DeLong either.
Yeah. Yeah. Nolan DeLong, Landon Van Kakerix, I think he's also in that same type of scenario. And Jaden Montgomery, we've always overlooked him as almost like I hate to say it, like all right, he's a legacy recruit and he's kind of small, didn't have any offers. So he's just kind of a guy they threw on. No, they like him too. So, but you have the older faction and the younger faction. The younger faction is way more athletic. The older faction hasn't really gotten its chance, not because of their own fault, just because of hey, you got Jay Higgins and Nick Jackson, and then before that, Jack Campbell and Seth Benson. Now, so I think that competition is going to be really strong. And Kirk was like, I don't know who's going to start with these positions. He said that on Monday night on Iowa Live. So I think they're setting it up to be an ultra competition because this, unlike the receiver room to me, Rob, this is a situation where if Weiskopf or Reese or Buffington can prove they should be on the field, then you play them because the other ones haven't had that kind of experience yet. And if you can have a redshirt freshman, even one of them can get out on the field, that means you're going to have them for at least a couple years, before they go to the NFL draft early.
Yeah.
But
the interesting thing too is those guys are going to get better as the season goes on through camp, through the early part of the season. Do they pass those older guys? I mean, it's something that may not sort itself out for a while.
Right. And, I'm sure Seth Wallace is looking at this going, we'd like to have at least one, maybe two of the older guys on the field because if nothing else, they've seen it in practice. They've been through it in film. They've sat next to these guys.
Been yelled at by Phil.
Yeah. Jaden Harrell, Carson Shire, you'd like to probably have them be on the field more than anybody else. But if it comes down to it and you're like, these guys are playing just as well and their trajectory is very quick because, not to say that they can't get better as seniors on the field for the first time.
Sure.
But if the other guys are taking that step forward, man, you want to make sure that you're right there. So I think this is a healthy situation. And I think early on this year, Rob, against, having Albany, Iowa State will be a challenge no matter what it is, but UMass at home, you've got the opportunity to kind of see it for what it is and then make your decision going into Indiana and Rutgers and then the bye week.
Yeah. So it's good to have competition. It seems like, the positions we've talked about, defensive line, wide receiver, linebacker, corner, safety. There's competition there. You have some depth, which is important as well at places like Iowa. You have to have some depth because there'll be injuries and attrition and things like that. So I thought it was a good takeaway from Saturday. Keep it in perspective, as Scott said, 1 of 15. A lot of guys were out, but a lot of positives coming out of Saturday, and we'll see what happens here. Coaches are digging in heavy now with recruiting here for the next couple months. Players will come back in June for get some training in, strength and conditioning, 7-on-7, things like that. So we'll have plenty of more football to talk about here moving forward. We'll talk a little bit about the NFL draft on the other side of this break, along with some basketball. But want to let you guys know that support for the podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. That is sui.org. We're going to hear from a few more of our sponsors right now, and Scott and I will be back on the other side of the break. Hang tight. We're back here on the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast to let you know that switching is easy. We do it all the time. We switch on the lights. We switch TV channels. Some of us switch partners while square dancing. Well, that's a stretch, but what's not a stretch is how you can switch and save with State Farm. In fact, State Farm agent Chad Birch right here in Iowa can switch you over so you can start saving today. Chad and his team are ready to welcome you to the State Farm neighborhood. With Chad Birch, it's easy to switch and save. Just give them a call when you want the real deal. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Black Angel Restaurant, downtown Iowa City. Perez Brothers owned and operated. You'll remember them from El Banditos, Perez Tacos, and other businesses here in Iowa City. They do a great job down there at Black Angel Restaurant. Live music on the weekends, great food all the time. Check them out, Black Angel Restaurant. Scott, let's flip over to men's basketball for a bit here, and another addition to the roster, Tate Sage. And I know I'm going to mess this up because he's got two first names, so I'm going to call him Sage Tate probably several times and hopefully not write that in an article that publishes. But Tate Sage, 6'7", out of Oklahoma, was committed to Drake, picked them over. I think I saw Missouri State, some other lower level, but good programs. And watched his video, watched some of his highlights last night. Reminds me a little bit of the Sanfords, taller wing type. Got some athleticism, so taking it to the basket, flushing it a few times, but really nice outside shot, consistent 3-point shooter. Needs to get a little bit of a quicker release, but makings there. Probably a guy you kind of bring off the bench and bring along a little bit slowly and see how he develops, but another piece to the Ben McCollum puzzle.
This is another important spot for Iowa men's basketball because this year is weird for them because they started with zero. I mean, all the players entered the portal. They brought back one, and then they had to start over. Well, they brought over, several from Drake, 5 from Drake. So you have that foundation, but then it's like go out and pick these pieces. But you need to stagger. You need to. You can't just have all seniors because then you're doing it all over again.
Exactly.
And this is a guy that was recruited to Drake. Looks to be kind of, again, that wing player that has become so prevalent in the game. It used to be called like a small forward, but I don't think that's really fair anymore. I think this is, he was committed to him earlier. He knew about him. I think he was forever. He was just like a silent commit to Iowa. I mean, I don't know why it took so long to punch it out there, but but he's out there. And I think when you look at, what Fulgaris signed on, that this is the type of player that can learn and play from watching him.
Yeah.
And you just need pieces right now. You need players that fit certain roles and also provide help for the future. That, Tate Sage is not a guy that you would expect to walk out day one and be a starter, or even a heavy contributor, but he's a guy that can learn this system. So by the time he's entering year 3, he might be able to fit that. And again, right now they're at 10 scholarship guys, and 11 players overall. You can get to 15. 13 is the optimum number for scholarship. But I also think that what they're probably going to do is, I'm not saying they bank scholarships or anything like that, but I think they'll be selective. There's no reason just to get guys, especially in today's era, Rob. It was one thing back in the old days where it's like just fill up your roster and get your scholarship guy. But now, because of the portal, you don't know what guy you're going to get. Back then it was freshmen. And so you could bring in a freshman, and it was a lower level freshman. And it's like, yeah, he'll be on our scout team. We'll see what we get. But now, if you get a junior from whatever college, you don't know what kind of person he is and how he fits. And that's a different vibe altogether. So I don't know that they'll go the full 13 here. They might get close to it, but maybe they pick up another walk-on along the way as just kind of a body for practice, if nothing else. But I like the way this is filled out, though, quite a bit. They need another big guy, and probably a point guard I know that's what they're definitely looking for, those two positions. But if they can get those two at the scholarship level, then I could see them even holding serve at 12.
Yeah, and you look at it, I'm looking down the roster now, as you said, Urick, I think that's how you say his name, Trevin Urick, 6'11", another guy you're not going to probably expect big minutes from in year 1. So, Figueres is 6'9", but he can play by the basket, but he's more of a skilled stretch 4 type. So really, Manyawu, I guess, is how we've been saying it. Yeah. He's more of a low block guy, but yeah, I think they need to kind of figure that out. And, what's behind Bennett Sturts at point guard? A lot of combo type guards on the roster now, but do you have somebody that can fill in at that point? And maybe get Sturts off the ball some too.
Yeah, I think that's the goal. That's something that, we had McCollum on Iowa Live a couple of weeks ago, and it was kind of asked, okay, what do you want? What do you need? And he's like, we need another point guard. And it probably will be very helpful in so many ways to get a younger guy that you feel like can step in and play, but somebody who also can run your system for 2 more years
Yeah.
or something like that.
Ideally, yeah.
Yeah. So if you can get a guy who's can be coming off, maybe a talented guy coming off a freshman year that come on and play behind Sturts, play, 15 minutes a game, 12 minutes a
I'm the
game.
next Bennett Sturts.
Exactly. It'd be perfect for him. Learn behind Sturts because Sturts is so good at so many different things.
And
He's
plays
like
40 minutes a game.
yeah, I don't think he'll play that many minutes in the Big Ten, Rob. I,
All
I
right,
think,
39.
yeah, 39 and a half like he did last year. No, that would be challenging
Yes.
to do that in this league. And as we know, it is a significant step up. I mean,
Yeah.
because the worst team in the Big Ten would be a competitive team in the Missouri Valley. And not saying they would win it, but looking at Washington, for instance, last
Mhm.
year with a multimillionaire out there, and they were 18th in the Big Ten. So
Nebraska didn't even make the Big Ten tournament.
I know they won the crown. They
Yeah,
won 21
so
games.
it's a good illustration there.
Yeah, so it's gonna be a grind for them. And I think they put together a really nice roster. I think they've got a chance to be a really good team this
Let me
year.
ask you this. I saw your guy, I think, at the Athletic talk about top 25, and there was somebody else. I'm just not there yet. We've talked through this a little bit, kind of the roster makeup and lacking a big maybe that you want to add or a point guard. Maybe I'll get there. I'm just not there yet.
I think if nothing else, I don't know if they're top 25. I mean, I don't know if anybody's, top
Yeah.
25 because there's just, I mean, you go through the rosters, and I keep up with it every single day on who goes and where they go on the Big Ten. And Indiana turned over its complete roster. Maryland turned over its roster. Minnesota, Iowa, a lot of teams turned over 3, 4, 5 guys and are bringing in 3, 4, 5 guys. So you just, and then there's the guys who left for, the NBA or whatever that, they expired on their eligibility. And it's just, when you look at what Iowa has and the pieces it has, Drake was very successful and put together a really good plan. Then you bring in Hassan, and you bring in, Fulgaris, Hassan Pfeffer. I know that's how I say it all the time.
Remember.
Yeah. Hassan Pfeffer. You think of Bugs Bunny.
Yes.
But you bring in those two, they're really good pieces. One's an elite shooter. The other is a elite pick and pop stretch 4-ish kind of guy to go along with a great point guard and some rebounders. Now you need to get your big. It doesn't have to be a dominant big. I would say just for past measurement, somebody like Ryan Kriener, I think would be really good for this team. It doesn't have to be Woodbury, who was an elite passer and defender. It doesn't have
Even
to be,
like a Gabe Olashaney.
yeah,
Somebody like that doesn't need the ball to be effective.
Somebody who can rebound, block out, score,
defend the rim.
Yep, 6 to 8 points a game, get 6 to 8 rebounds a game. Just be a presence in the post and don't foul out. And then Uric come in and spell them, and then play if you need to because of foul trouble or God forbid an injury. Have some players who can kind of move over to the 5 once in a while. I think they'd be fine. And there are some of their players are a little bigger. Manyau is a guy that can really, play 5 if he needed to. So it's just whether they're top 25, I don't know. But
I think I think there's a path to that. I'm just not there yet.
Our guy CJ Moore is a guy that if he says something, I kind of listen just because he knows everything about basketball and he played it in college and stuff. And I think he's always been high on Ben McCollum's schematics as the best scheming coach in the country. And he was that way. He thought of him that way at Northwest. And he thought of him that way at Drake. Thinks he'll be that way at Iowa. And you throw that on with some pretty good talent. I would say not elite athletic talent, but talent for basketball.
Skilled basketball players. Even Tate Sage. When I was watching his film last night after he committed, I'm like, this kid's skilled.
Yeah.
Dribble with both hands, defends,
Yeah.
can dribble drive, can spot up, can free up to get his shot off a dribble. So you can see all the skills. And if you look at the Drake guys, all very skilled.
And, I know the ignorance or willful ignorance that some people have when oh, I don't want him. That's Tom Licklider. And then that's just ridiculous. That what they're saying about McCollum. It's like, are you stupid or just willfully ignorant? I don't know. And then
combination.
Yeah. And well, he plays that slow down style. Well, he did it by design because the athletes you had at Drake, a lot of them were D2 guys, a lot of them were transfers, just weren't in that same category as some of the athletes, especially when they're playing in the tournament against Mizzou. But they were 4-1 against power conference teams, and Vanderbilt they beat, and they were a tournament team. Mizzou was a really good team. They
looked, when I didn't watch a lot of them, but did watch them in the NCAA tournament. They matched up with the teams they played without issue.
Texas Tech was clearly more athletic.
Yeah.
It wasn't close. However, that they used their skills to compete in that game. They were efficient. And the way I look at it is, now that you've got pieces around them, maybe, the athletic wise, I don't know if they're there yet. It reminds me style wise, if they could get to this point, is kind of the way Bobby Knight played in Indiana, which was different than the way Indiana's played for 25 years. But they were very defensive and they were very efficient on offense, and they were skilled and they could score. But they also would grind you to a halt on offense to the point where you just gave up points. You're like, I'm sick of defending. And that's when they were at their best. And if Iowa can get to that point, obviously they're going to be in a high level team. And I think with this kind of IQ and this kind of skill, that they can enter that conversation. It's just, it takes some time when you just turn over your roster on a team that was 17-16 last year.
Yeah, maybe I'm not giving enough credit as CJ is to McCollum's X's and O's and the ability to put his guys in position. But as we saw with Drake, he maximizes his roster. If he can do that here next year, then I think there is a path to the top 25. The path is just littered with really good teams in the Big Ten, 17 other Big Ten teams, and a pretty good non-conference schedule, including Iowa State. So, we'll see how it goes. But I think what we said all along, Scott, you want to build enthusiasm. You want to create hope. They're on the right path to that. You can only do what you can do in the offseason and build the roster, and we'll kind of just follow along here and see how it goes. But encouraged so far. You also had Jan Jensen on Iowa Live recently. We talked about Chit Chat last week that they added. What did she say in terms of where else they might want to supplement their roster?
I think that was pretty much it. She hadn't gotten Chit Chat yet. So I think that's really, I think right now, the way it looks anyway, that they're just kind of, I don't know if, big game fishing is kind of the way to describe it, or just going out to see what might be available and see how.
And they have doors open. I mean, those Caitlin teams help open doors. So now maybe you get into somebody's door that you wouldn't have before and can help your roster.
And that's always important. I mean, now, is it a depth piece? Is that something that they want to get? You've got players on your roster that, and this is the kind of what we talked about a little bit of wide receiver, I suppose, but completely different level, is that they've got a lot of talent, and they've got a lot of they've had some turnover, but they also have some pieces back. Do you want to get somebody who is the equivalent of Taylor McCabe, or somebody the equivalent of Kylie Feuerbach, if they're not going to play, if you're going to take minutes away from them and stall the development of that player, and somebody like Taylor Stremlow or Callie Levine, if they're clearly better, or they clearly have a skill set that this team doesn't have, maybe as a shooter, for instance. Mm-hmm. Maybe you look at this roster and go, you know what, we could really use another 3-point shooter to go along with Taylor McCabe. That's understandable. Okay, go out. But if it's somebody that's just a well-rounded player, how is that different than, playing Journey Houston, playing Allie Deal, right away, playing.
Yeah, I mean, do you need a Molly
Deal? I'm sorry.
Do you need a Molly Davis type? I mean, if somebody like that was there, somebody that kind of just fills in, and they had her for 2 years, so a little different. I'm not saying just that position. I'm talking about maybe a veteran that can help you? Because you got a lot of young kids on this roster
Yeah.
still.
Yeah, but I think you have Chit Chat for that.
Yeah.
Is your point guard. So you added your point guard there. Um, you kind of go in position by position with the women on the players you bring back. You look at you know one is going to be probably Chit Chat right off the bat. I mean, that's the position she plays, and that's what she gets you in. Addie Deal is going to play. She's going to start. She's just too good. Okay, then you have Feuerbach and you have McCabe. They're there too. What do they bring? Then you got, then you got Taylor Stremlow and Journey Houston. So you've got players in that kind of 2-3 range. You got Hannah Stolke's coming back at your 4. And also Tegan Malini, who I think has got a chance to, I think she might have the best chance to make a jump second year. She showed a lot of talent and flashed a little bit, but she also was inconsistent, which I think younger players who are kind of experiencing the Big Ten sometimes happen.
Seemed like she was adjusting to the speed of the game most of the
Yeah,
season, and
right.
she'll get there.
She'll get there. I think she's very talented. At the 5, you've got Ava Hayden, and you've also got Layla Hayes coming in, who that was one that she said what really surprised me. Rob last week has said she's as skilled as any big post players they've had. Now she's not a real great free throw shooter, I can tell you that. But other than that, she was really really good. So
I think that might be the key, right?
yeah,
That can you figure out that 5 between
mhm.
Hayden and
Hayes.
Hayes, and then can Hannah, with a full season, not having to recover from injury, can she develop into the 4 where that can step out and shoot a little bit and free up the block area for Hayden or Hayes?
Yeah, right. And so if you're looking at it just kind of how you figure depth, if Hayden is a 22-minute person, Hayes is an 18, or if you move sometimes you might move Stolke to the 5, that sort of thing, then your 5 is pretty well set. And you look at your 4, if that's Stolke for 23 to 25 minutes at the 5 and maybe 5 at the post, you're in good shape. Malini, if you get 15-ish out of her, sometimes you're going to go 4 guards.
Yeah.
So then, okay. But you've got 4 people playing the 4 and the 5 that you feel pretty good about probably. And then you throw on Chit Chat at 1, Deal at 2, but Deal can also play 1. She can also play 3, but so it depends on that. You also got same deal with McCabe and Feuerbach, so that's what 4 other players that I mentioned there, and Stremlow, so 5. And then you've got Jada Gyamfi, Callie Levine, Journey Houston. So you're at what is that 12 that I'm counting right there? I think that's right. Yeah. So you've got 12 players right now. Maybe they add another one somewhere down the road, but overall, you got to feel pretty good about what they've got. And then if I don't know if they have any Kenise Johnson, I don't know what her
She's been
status.
hurt a lot.
Yeah, she didn't play at all last year. I don't think she played the year before either. So uh, I have no idea what she's all there for. But my point is that I think
Young roster though. That's a
yeah,
young roster.
it is.
That's
Outside,
that's the if you're looking, it's just we saw the Stremlow had moments, Mulaney had moments, so there are going to be growing pains for some of the younger players. Um, that stability, you're really going to need a lot out of Taylor McCabe and Kylie Feuerbach in terms of leadership, and Jim
mhm.
Fee too. She's been around and seen a lot.
Yeah. I mean, Jim Fee she's been really, really popular.
Good
Really
teammate.
great teammate, fun to be around. How much on the floor is she going to be? I don't want to predict that. She's got a chance. I mean, everybody's got a chance to take that step forward, but I would say from particularly Feuerbach, Stolke, and McCabe,
Salty too, yeah.
you're going to need your
Leadership.
seniors to really be the guiding moment, because as you said, the rest of them are pretty young. Jim Fee, isn't as young. She'll be a senior or high level junior, but she's also hasn't played very much, and that kind of matters too. So yeah, it's going to be a young roster, a lot of turnover. I mean, you think about losing Lucy Olson and Sydney Affolter, which are probably your 2 best players from last year. A year after losing, you know, the best player who ever played, and Caitlin Clark. And I'm not being facetious, I'm being realistic. And then Kate Martin, who is an elite player. That's a lot. And the Big Ten, like in men's basketball and football, it's not going anywhere. So there's some, they, so if they do pick up somebody, I think if I were Iowa, pick up a shooter, pick up somebody who can hit 40% from three, and if they're off the bench, that's great. But that's the player I'd want.
Yeah, you can always use shooters. You never have enough shooters, just like you can never have enough wide receivers. All right, Scott, let's wrap up with some NFL draft here. Just go over. We talked about last week. We used Dane Brugler and the Beast as kind of our guide of grades for these guys. He did pretty well, I think. He had Caleb Johnson as a second round grade, 19th pick in the third round to the Steelers. YA, he had a fifth round grade on. He won the fifth round, right?
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
And then they had the seventh round guys.
Yeah.
Lachey was graded as a sixth and seventh round. Richmond was graded as a free agent.
And so was Colby.
Colby was graded as a free agent. So kind of out performed their grades, so to speak. But we kind of saw this class being what it ended up being, Scott, and that's a lot of guys that are going to have a chance to show what they can do in mini camps and training camps, and they got a shot. And that's all you really can ask for. I guess your overall thoughts of this Hawkeye draft class.
It's kind of funny, Rob, that they had 5 guys drafted, which is usually a really good year. It was more than anybody in the Big 12, and it was more than every team but one in the ACC. Yet it feels like a disappointing year because, we wanted to see others. You just do. Not having Jay Higgins was just a surprise. That one was like, really? Jay Higgins?
He had a sixth or seventh round grade from Dane and signed with free agent with the Ravens, which
right. Yeah.
They're smart.
You got to change.
They're smart.
The Eagles and the Ravens are like the two franchises that if they pick you, it's almost like a default. It's like, of course it's the Ravens or of course it's the Eagles, and they're so smart, and of course year after year they prove why they are. But that was the one that you're just like, really? Jay Higgins couldn't get a 7th round guy. Somebody couldn't grab him late. But hey, he has overperformed his recruiting grades. He's overperformed on the field. He'll do the same thing in the NFL. I think he's, whether it's in Baltimore or somewhere else, he's going to have a home and he's going to play.
And you look what Baltimore did with Christian Welch. Mm-hmm. Just kind of got him in, got his feet wet, got him experience, and he's still in the league with Green Bay.
Yeah, he's still in the league, and he's one of the best special teamers in football.
And Jay will help somebody on special teams, no doubt.
Right. He's, Christian. He's kind of freakish athletically. Yes. Him and Ben Neiman were in the same kind of caliber. I mean, they're just and Nick Neiman too. Athletically, that's why they're really good at the predisposed to special teams. But at the same time, I think Jay has probably a better chance to make it as an inside linebacker somewhere and start and play some special teams as well. And then the fact that the kickoffs aren't the same as they once were, kind of helps him more than anything else. Because, instead of running, 70 yards or 65 yards to go tackle somebody, now you only have to run like 25 yards or something. But besides him, great opportunities for both Caleb Johnson and YA Black. Caleb is going to a place where they value running the football, Steeler football, physical football. They want a running back like him. He provides it. This is perfect for them. And it was kind of funny because it coincided with everybody. All eyes were on that pick for Shedeur Sanders, and they still drafted Caleb Johnson. So it shows you what their values are, and they're going to get back to that on the offense. Same thing with defense with YA Black. You throw him with Derek Harmon, their first round pick, who just a sad, bittersweet day. His mother was dying.
Horrible.
But she at least lived long enough to see him picked. And that's just really, it's tough, but you're glad for that, if nothing else. But those two together on that Steeler defense, I mean, they got eaten alive in the playoffs against the Ravens. So both of those two together are going to change some things. I like San Francisco needed offensive linemen, didn't draft offensive linemen until they got to Connor Colby. I thought that was, it's a really good place. It's a zone scheme. It's Shanahan. Literally it's the Shanahan offense because Shanahan's the head coach, Kyle Shanahan. So he'll fit in nicely. He knows how to do it. Mason Richmond going to Seattle. I'm happy for Mason because I never really wondered or never really thought, why is a 4-year starter at left tackle at Iowa not going to be a draft pick? And so going to Seattle helps him. And then there are the four free agent signings, and all of them have really good chances. Castro goes to the Steelers too. He's got that same type of ability. They like physical football players in Pittsburgh, and so he'll endear himself.
It's
Probably
nice for those three guys too to be together.
Yeah, right.
Caleb and YA and Sebastian, so they can kind of help each other. It's not easy to go into those, be a rookie and try to figure things out. So it'd be nice to have friends to lean on.
Exactly. And he'll be a special team guy, maybe a backup on defense. And
I think he's still a good player. He just didn't have a great year, and it wasn't a terrible year. It was tough coming off the previous year when he was really good. So I still think there's something there with Castro.
Yeah, it's what happens. I think, Rob, a lot of times is, I mean, when you come back for an extra year and you played well the year before, there's an expectation it happens a lot with quarterback at Iowa. If you're a good junior, then everybody always talking about, oh, they suck as seniors. And in his case, I think he wasn't great because we expected greatness. He was good. Maybe not as good as he wanted to be, but and then there was I'll get to Jamari last, but Luke Elkin, perfect spot. He was considered the number 2 long snapper. The Vanderbilt guy went in the draft. Everybody targeted him right afterwards, and it was kind of funny. I heard the story about this. He was in his apartment in Iowa City, and he had his phone, and his dad was there. His dad had his phone because they needed to provide 2 phone lines for those conversations. And Torrey was also there in Iowa City. So the Bears became an easy sell for him. Reunites with Torrey, who's not only the punter, but he's also the holder. And that's who he works with the most. So I would very much be surprised if he doesn't make that team, because you provide consistency there. And then finally, Jamari Harris. We can debate all we want. We already have what he did, the right thing or wrong thing. It doesn't matter now. He's in Tennessee. He's got a chance. Tennessee had the number 1 draft pick for a reason. So now he's got an opportunity, and that's all you can ask for. So, hopefully he makes the most of it. And then
they zone. Tennessee play zone.
Yeah, that I'd have to look a little more closely because they were, doing a new coach.
I think that kind of limited Jamari, the belief that he's a zone corner only.
Yeah.
So that kind of limits the opportunities. But I mean, if he can, like you said, it wasn't a good team last year. They're probably looking at everybody now, so it's a good opportunity because they want to upgrade everywhere.
Yeah, they want to upgrade everywhere. They only really had one good, you could say, corner last year, and he didn't play his best, and that's Janarius Sneed. Was with they paid a lot for him from Kansas City and everything. So that was one. Let's see, they also didn't draft a corner. So I think that's something that you've got to examine. And I think that's why he ended up in a really good opportunity. They didn't draft anybody. They only had one, L'Jarius Sneed, who's a good corner. So that's the benefit of not getting drafted is you pick your spot. And if you go somewhere like that, and I don't have their financial situation memorized, but a lot of times they want guys who can compete. And he's shown, he shows he can compete on special teams and be a sub package guy probably right away. And free agents make teams. So he's got a chance, and that's what it's all about. And then on the other side, I was a little disappointed for Nick Jackson to not get it was not signed, but he also got a free agent or a tryout with the Ravens. Tyler Ellsbury got a tryout with the Seahawks. And
anything on Quinn Schulte?
When I heard Raiders, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
A tryout. and Spencer Petras try out with the Chiefs. So
And the Chargers.
and the Chargers 1 week and then the next.
Texted with him yesterday a
Yeah.
little bit. He's pretty jacked up for it. So
Yeah, I'm
good luck to
excited for
him.
him. I hope. I don't know if it's how it's going to go with him. You know, maybe if he's out in the Chargers, that Harbaugh will apologize for crushing him in that championship game, and or apologize for the knowing all their signals in that championship game. But yeah, I'm happy for him personally. No.
And like I think we both agree. I think if he wants to, he could be a heck of a coach. And this is just another networking opportunity if things don't work out and he doesn't make a practice squad or stick anywhere.
Yeah, if nothing else, I would love to see him go to camp with a team, get signed, get in a preseason game, get a name with their jersey on it.
Yep.
You know, and whether you make the roster, which is probably unlikely, but maybe make a practice team, maybe float around, you know, it's an opportunity again, and opportunities matter.
Yeah, no doubt. And all these guys have opportunities, and we wish them the best on that. And long list and history of Iowa guys kind of just getting their foot in the door and getting through it and putting together careers in the NFL. Let's wrap up a little bit with Iowa baseball and softball, Scott. I know neither one of us has followed a lot of it, but we didn't want to go through without at least mentioning how well both are playing. Iowa baseball 31-13, 20-4 in the conference. As we said before recording, they just got to stop losing midweek games because as good as that record is, guys, they're still kind of right. The Baseball America has them in, but as of last week, Baseball America had them as the last 4 in. So that kind of it's tenuous.
Yeah, this has got to be the most frustrating thing. I mean, if you're rooting for them, and I guarantee it's frustrating for Rick Heller and the players, is you can have awesome weekend series in the Big Ten and be leading the Big Ten, but if you keep stubbing your toe in the midweek against teams that are beneath you, like my alma mater over my shoulder, Western Illinois, you're going to damage your opportunities, because the Big Ten is not the Big Ten in baseball. It's like the MAC in baseball. It just has that reputation until it's got the name brands, but it doesn't have any kind of gravitas when it comes to getting into the tournament and doing things in the tournament. So you want to put yourself in position, if you have this kind of season, to get to the tournament, even if you don't win the Big Ten tournament. And right now they're really losing Illinois State and losing to Western Illinois and some of the other midweek games. It's just a killer. And I haven't talked to Rick about it. Traditionally in the midweek, they just get other guys in there, but man, it's not your Friday, Saturday, or Sunday starter, but you need somebody to come in and pitch well and play well. I mean, giving up a grand slam the other day, it's not going to help you get to the tournament. And this team, it'd be a real shame if they can't get there, because they deserve it.
At Washington this weekend, Scott, that starts tomorrow, Friday, May the 2nd. It's 9 o'clock Eastern. These are all on Big Ten Plus, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Then next week, midweek scheduled against Illinois, Chicago. Then Oregon State in Des Moines, and then Oregon and Iowa City, two traditionally strong baseball programs in the Oregon teams. And I don't know much about Washington this year, but I'm sure they're halfway decent. And so work to do still, can't fall off, can't slip up here, because not firmly in the NCAA tournament, although some projections do have them in. Softball, 32-17 after a 5-0 win against Iowa State the other day, getting revenge from an earlier loss in Ames. And the softball team is home for the final series of the season, Scott, against Rutgers this weekend. Friday, tomorrow, May the 2nd, 5 o'clock Central. Same time on Saturday, and then a nooner on Sunday. Hawkeyes are 12-7 in the conference. Great story.
This is, I mean, they're not the best team on campus.
And I should mention Renee Gillespie will not be back. Hopefully, whatever she's dealing with, best to her.
Yeah, for sure. That was the point I was going to make on this, is that, Renee Gillespie was out all year. It was announced last fall. And then, now that she's not going to continue as coach, I don't know the exact specifics on that. I haven't checked into it, but I'll say this, that there are a lot of really good teams that have competed at Iowa this year in different sports. Baseball, of course, is as good as any of them. But the softball team may be the best story, because they had an interim coach. They had a blow up, a significant blow up with the players and the coach. The interim coach was removed, brought in a second interim coach, and here they are. They're playing winning softball, and they're playing. I'd have to look, Rob. I can't remember the last time when they've had this kind of a season, where probably since Gail Blevins, maybe, that they've been in this position, and so to do that, all things considered, it speaks heavily for the players and the staff to be able to hold it together. And they're going to have a national search. I would expect Iowa to be to push hard for a really good coach. Beth has shown that. I mean, she did that in gymnastics too, when she got Jen Llewellyn from the University of Washington.
Yep.
That was after, and dealt with a big situation with Larissa Libby, pushing her out. So this is I think the sun might be rising a little bit on the women's softball program, and this year is one that should go down as a memorable one. I would encourage people to, maybe, if you got a couple hours to spare this weekend, to maybe go out and check them out.
Yeah, no doubt. And Gail Blevins, legendary coach, super coach for softball. She showed it can be done here, and there are a heck of a lot of good softball players right here in Iowa that can help you build this thing to maybe have a consistent winner. Something that looks like this year consistently. It's possible. So we'll see what we can do in terms of hiring somebody and national search, and how attractive the job will be. I know they talked about some renovations down there too at Pearl Field, just in terms of reconfiguring things down there a little bit. They've talked about that in the last couple of years, but I'm not sure how long. How far along that's got. Facilities are always kind of those things that's kind of like roster management. It's always kind of developing, and you kind of keep an eye on how things go and keeping up with the Joneses. So, all right, Scott, I think we've hit on everything here. I got to get my kid to work. Hopefully everybody has a great weekend. Again, as Scott said, if you're in the area, Iowa City this weekend, weather's supposed to be pretty decent. Check out the softball team against Rutgers down at Pearl Field. And then keep an eye on recruiting and the transfer portal. That never stops. And we'll be back next week to talk about it. So thank you to all of our sponsors. Thank you, folks, for listening, and be well, and we will talk to you soon. Say goodbye, Scott.
Goodbye, Scott.